Thank you everybody for joining Prime Time at 900.
So can I see? Can you guys hear me well?
Yes, Ashish, absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
So the ground rules stay the same. Your questions, your feedbacks would be taken from the chat box. And if you just move your cursor there, you'd get to see the chat symbol, and do type in your questions to us for the speaker, and we'll be reading them out to the speaker so that he can answer you all. A very warm welcome once again to Prime Time at 1900. We are lined up with a great show tonight and the coming nights as well. Thank you so much for all the encouragement and support. Three more minutes and we'll be there. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, Vikram. Welcome to Prime Time. Are you on mute, Vikram? I can't hear you. Can anybody else confirm that, please?
I've removed mute and I'm talking. Can you hear me?
Yes. Perfect. Perfect. Can hear you.
We'll wait for the others then.
Yes, Vikram. I think a very interesting topic today, especially for people like me to know more on the subject. Really thankful to the idea of Prime Time and the audience for all the love and support. Another great evening of learning. So we are a minute away. A very warm welcome to everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all our audience who has joined from a global front. It's really great to see how we are distant but still connected. Thank you so much for joining us at Prime Time at 1900. As I said, you can put your comments and your questions and your feedback for us on the chat. And we're right on time, 1900. A very warm welcome once again to our guest, Ashish sir. Vikram, you're right there. And without further ado, let me hand it over to Vikram.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and it's a privilege to have you with us, Ashish.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I mean, Ashish has been one of the most humble human beings I've ever met. Despite the amazing success he's always had his feet on the ground. Those of you who don't know a little bit about Ashish, he did his entire schooling in Gujarati medium, landed in IIT Bombay with very little handle of English, and landed in IIT Bombay 3 months into the course because his 12th standard exam in Gujarat was postponed because of some riots. He had he had visions of leaving IIT, continued, passed up with flying colors, then came to IIM Calcutta, where coincidentally he was a senior of mine. And from there, he's also handpicked as one of the 6 people to create National Stock Exchange. That's where I had the privilege of working very closely with him. Uh, Subsequent to that, Ashish has continued to be in the stock market world. But for those of you there, Ashish also had an interesting stint as the Chief Executive Officer of Mumbai Indians. So I don't want to take any more time of you. So I pass it on to KG and welcome again, Ashish.
Thank you.
Hey Ashish, so I think it's a wonderful privilege to have you. I don't want to add more introduction to the already wonderful introduction that Vikram has done of you, and we have promoted this internally. The story that you bring is amazing. So I think we'll just not come in the way between you and the audience. So go ahead, Ashish. As I always say, go ahead, make our day.
Thank you, KG, and thank you, Vikram. And if CP is there, thank you, CP, for inviting me. It's, I think, one of the first for me to be speaking to a company audience on a Zoom call. I have talked to company audiences in person, but never on sort of a video call. So thank you for this experience. I'll tell you the topic which I was asked and I had told was that how the modern automated stock exchanges got created and how they helped Indian IT companies grow. So I'll take you back to the kind of late 80s where the world was on what I call floor. The stock markets are very exciting because they create wealth. They, of course, make people lose money, but we tend to remember only the successful people. So effectively, they are very exciting for people who remain or who have not tried. People who have actually lost money, they go away and we don't remember them. It's like movie stars, we remember Amitabh Bachchan, but not the extras who came from Allahabad and remained on footpath. So that's how the stock markets are very, very exciting, and they perform a very important role for channelizing the savings of people who are savers, which are generally the households, into the productive capital. So in a way, they have a very important role to play in any economy. And all over the world, the stock markets are around 400 years old. The first stock exchange was set up in Amsterdam in 1607, which is around 413 years back. And they were guilds, like any other guild that would be. And so they used to have the technology of a floor. I won't get you into how these exchanges arose and what components worked for setting up exchanges in the world, and then how it came into India. But in late 80s, the world had many exchanges. Each country had several exchanges. And the prevalent technology of running exchange was the floor. You had a good floor. In cold countries, you had to warm the floor. And you had to clean it up every day. And that was the technology. And so the cost was very low. But people who had license to go into the trade, which used to be called brokers or dealers, and they had a particular ringside view of what was happening. They could execute on that. They were getting faster information and they were getting faster execution and more transparency than a person sitting somewhere else. Why I'm giving you this concept is this is a large ramifications or large implications on what happened later on. And those guys basically were the owners of the exchanges. So they were the players, they were also the owners, and they were also running it as a cooperative, as an association of persons. They were regulators also. And this is not only for India, but in US, we had 2 large exchanges. One was called New York Stock Exchange, other was called NASDAQ. But then there were 10 more exchanges like Chicago Stock Exchange and American Exchange and Philadelphia Exchange and many other exchanges. In India, we had 22 exchanges before 1994. So we had basically exchanges in Patna, we had exchange in Hyderabad, we had exchange in pretty much every large town, which had a large, good, important politician who would get a stock exchange to his city. And that was true with Europe. Even a small country like Sweden with 10 million people had a Swedish stock exchange. Germany had its own multiple exchanges, and UK had many. And so that was basically, it was also that based on the experiences, many academic papers which were coming out of the great schools we keep on sort of dreaming about studying there. But they all, the professors, the great professors, also wrote that the liquidity, which is the trading volumes, come out of the animal spirit that goes on in the floor. So those floor traders would get together, shout at each other, and that's how, if you do it any other way, it will not get you the liquidity. That was the basic sum and substance that was sort of going on. But around late 70s, early 80s, a new exchange framework was coming up in US, which was called NASDAQ. And they had basically screens, and people used to sit on the screens, and they had computers. They would punch their codes. Codes is something where you are saying, I'm willing to buy or sell that particular stock. So they would be putting their code, and those codes will be available to everyone to see. And then if you want to trade with that guy, you would call him up again, and he would basically, you can trade separately, but you were getting the codes there. Sitting here in India, we thought NASDAQ is an automated exchange because there is a screen. But the matching used to happen manually between two players on the phone instead of a floor. Floor, you get together and shout and shove and push each other and stuff like that. While as on the phone, basically you talk to each other remotely by looking at the codes, and then you trade at the same price or any other price which you want. So that was broadly the trading part of it. But an exchange has multiple functions. One is the trading part, which is what we call secondary market, where you trade, agreement to exchange. Then you need to decide the obligations. You have bought a lot and sold a lot during the day. Then you have you have to decide the obligation at the end of the day. And then you have to settle whatever you have finally net bought or net sold. There is a technical concept called multilateral netting, which is you can buy to multiple people, buy from multiple people, sell to multiple people the same thing. At the end of the day, whatever net remains is what you need to settle. So that's called multilateral netting. So a little bit of jargon in financial markets I'm giving you. Probably it might help you in your developing softwares for some of them. But that was broadly the sort of circumstances. And then in UK, they tried to automate the market. And then they had a new software created called Taurus in late 80s. And Anderson Consulting was the consultant, and they had spent like $300-400 million of those times, pounds, which would be worth probably $3-4 billion of our times, or even more. They had spent that, they started and it did not work. And so every time somebody tried, it was somebody large tried, it was failing largely because the people who were used to a particular system and found that any transparency will take away their margins, were opposing it, and not directly. Sometimes they would go on strike, which is direct, but many times they would just sort of sabotage it because they were the users, and they would ensure they will feign ignorance, they will say this is not working and all those kind of things. So it was going on. And in early 90s, in 1991, we had a balance of payment crisis. Before that, just before that, we had set up another exchange called Over-the-Counter Exchange of India. Now, people who are familiar with the jargons in financial markets, over-the-counter is actually an opposite of exchange. What you don't do, what trades you don't do on the exchange is called over-the-counter. But like we do everything, we also mixed up and we called it Over-the-Counter Exchange of India, which was a quote-driven exchange like NASDAQ. And it did not work out. And then 91, we had this great balance of payment crisis in India, and the economy started liberalizing as an outcome of that. The market started going up, and everyone was happy. The government was happy. Everyone was happy that this liberalization is yielding results, and a lot of people are liking it because the stock market index is going up, which is Sensex. And so it was, the index was going up. everyone was happy. Prime Minister, Finance Minister, everyone on the road were happy. And time one scandal came out around 92, and suddenly the market collapsed. And that scandal is now known as Harshad Mehta scandal, where BSE broker, he was also broker on many exchanges, but BSE is particularly notorious because it is oldest. And so that broker is supposed to have taken the funds in a sort of unethical way from RBI RBI related banks and used it for taking up the prices in stocks which he wanted. And so it was actually the issue which was in a way problems with the RBI settlement system. And he kind of manipulated it, not only him, but there were other people also. But he was supposed to be the largest in that game. And they ended up sort of creating money out of thin air like people do with Bitcoin now. But he ended up creating money out of thin air, which he used to take up stock prices. And that's how the markets, it seems, had gone up. And when the scandal came out, the markets went down. You couldn't have blamed the RBI because they are regulators, and you couldn't have blamed the bankers because they can speak English and go to Delhi and talk about it in English with bureaucrats. And the brokers, as a group, was a very strange group in India. They were hereditary brokers, and you and me couldn't become brokers in those days. You had to be literally born into the family or married into the family to become brokers. Or you had to have like literally huge clout to push them into be making you broker. Like today, if you want to become a member of Bombay Gymkhana or Delhi Gymkhana, you have to you have 35-year waiting, but then there are some nice people who get in fast, right? So those were the days of rationing, and Bombay Stock Exchange was like a symbol of that inbreeding. And they were unruly. They were dhoti topi, as we call it. The notices used to come in Gujarati those days till 1994. But effectively, 92, this Harshad Mehta scam happened, and OTC did not work out. And then government decided that we need to do something about this exchange business, because there are 22 of them. All of them are equally bad. There is no transparency. The amount of transaction cost which a customer pays is very high, and we need to basically improve them. There were two ways to improve them. One was to kind of force them to do it, but it's not easy to force people to do anything, actually, especially if they're virtual monopolies. And the other way to do was to create a competition. So there was a committee set up called Fairvani Committee. Mr. Fairvani, M.J. Fairvani, used to be the chairman of Unit Trust of India. That time, Unit Trust of India was very large. In fact, the only mutual funds in India. And he was like the #1 person in stock market by money. I mean, not individually, but he was an employee. And so Fairvani Committee recommended that you need to set up a model exchange which was automated. Now, automation has various meanings, right? Whether you basically trade physically and then enter the data, or phone each other and enter the data. So there are various ways of automation, and each would be called automated. And there were no large exchanges which were actually automated those days. And this is like 1992. So IDBI was told to set up the new model exchange called National Stock Exchange. Now, IDBI today is what I call a pale fraction of what IDBI used to be those days. IDBI was the largest financial institution in India, and it used to also manage all corporate foreign currency debt in India. And it was like very, very large compared to the size of the economy, compared to what, I mean, it's more similar to SBI today, but it was lending long term, not short term, for the large projects and all. And so IDBI was told to set up this new stock exchange. And I happened to work at IDBI as an industrial finance officer, grade B. If you are aware of the what I call the banking system, This grade B is an interesting stuff. When you join as an officer by giving exams, this competitive exams in India, then it's called grade A officer. And then this grade B comes after 7-8 years. But the IIT IIM guys were taken in as the grade B guys fast, immediately after the college and 1 year of training. So I had joined in 91 as a management trainee. And in 92, I had become a IFO, as they call industrial finance officer. And I was doing project finance in power plants and electronic goods and electrical machinery and all. And I was enjoying looking at all the new power plants. I'm basically an engineer, like many of you. And so it was like fun, very exciting, also talking finance. And I was also investing in stock markets. BSE was pretty much a few kilometers away. Many of my colleagues, slightly senior guys, were on the board of various companies because those days IDBI was nominating board members in each company, which they were funding. And that meant every company literally. And junior officers like me were also put on those boards. And so my senior people were already on those boards, and they would give us a lot of insider information. And so we were all trading, doing all sorts of things. And my salary was 3,000 rupees. And I was having positions of like few lakh rupees, which were running. And I'd also made a lot of money. But when this Harshad Mehta scam happened, I lost more than 50,000 rupees. So like more than my year's salary, I lost, and I learned a great lesson. So you don't learn lessons by being successful. You learn lessons by being a failure, right? So I have learned out of my failures, and I have had many failures. So that's how I learned much more than most other people. But basically, I had a reputation in IDBI of being some sort of a IT whiz kid. And it has nothing to do with my being an IT guy. I'm a mechanical engineer. And I did a little bit of programming, of course, in Fortran and all. But I also did some basic, there is a language called BASIC. So I did programming, and I'm probably pretty much in the first 5 people probably did programming in BASIC because of the lab I was working in mechanical engineering. It had nothing to do with computer science. But I had some sort of exposure, and then in IIM I'd learned how to do spreadsheets and all. So I was working on spreadsheets, and it was like a miracle for the old style bankers who used to use calculators. Many of them used to actually do manual calculations of millions of points. And then there were experts who were experts in calculators. And here I come, a young guy, pretty much a young boy, who could type himself, which was a novelty for public sector those days. Even otherwise, there used to be stenos and typists. I used to type myself. I used to file myself. I used to go and keep the files myself and do stenography, even cyclostyling, everything myself. So, and I could do sort of changes in the spreadsheets in minutes vis-a-vis what used to take them months. And so people in IDBI thought I'm kind of a whiz kid in IT, which was basically like you using the iPhone as an expert. And then people think you are Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, which is not true. And that happened to me. But sometimes you have to live up to wrong reputation. So this IDBI was told to set up the NSE, and they were searching for 5 people who would set that up. And then there was a boss who was a 6th person, as Vikram said. And so they selected 5 people, and all 5 of them, it seems, had gone to set up SEBI before in 1989 to SEBI. And they had just come back to IDBI after setting up, some of them, not all. But 5 people who had come back, they were selected. At least 4 of them had gone to SEBI, and 1 person who was pretty smart, they selected those 5. And one of the smartest of the lot dropped out, saying that a stock exchange run by a sort of group of bankers who are bureaucrats cannot run. And he had ambition to become very large in banking system, and stock market is like a dirty game. Those days it was like really bad. And after Harshad Mehta scam, it had gone to literally pits. So he dropped out. And so the IDBI management had now a dilemma who to select, because if they select a senior person, that guy has a right to say no. So they had to select a guy who cannot say no and who has no clue, basically. So that was me. So I became the 5th Bakra in the entire process. The other 4 had gone knowingly. I was the guy who had no clue, and I was told, boss, you will work on this project, and like finance, power plant financing. I said, okay, let's see what happens. And then I realized after going to the team that I'm the only engineer in the team, and I'm the only Gujarati in the team. And I was the youngest by 6 years compared to the nearest young person. So I was literally the errand boy, said, boss, chai chahiye, so I had to go and bring tea. Coffee chahiye, to go and bring coffee, that kind of stuff. And of course, you are from IIT, IIM, you can always say, boss, I don't want to do this job and run away. Instead, I stuck on. Then whatever they couldn't do, I had to do. And whatever they didn't want to do, I had to do. So they didn't want to basically work on hiring premises.
Ashish,
So I had to do work.
Ashish,
Yes,
Ashish, I just sorry to CP Gurnani just joined. He wanted to say hi to you. He has to
CP,
run
how are
to
you?
another meeting.
Thank you, CP, for joining. Appreciate.
I don't know whether
CP is on mute. Yeah, he's on mute.
Oh, he's on mute, is it?
How are you? Thank you for addressing all of us. I unfortunately work for Vikram Nair, and he keeps me busy with meetings while he has fun and getting advice from you.
Thank you, sir. I vouch your dilemma because I have worked with him, and he's like that.
नहीं वो
He
खतरों
makes
का
boss
खिलाड़ी
sincere.
है. I mean,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I know. I mean, since Vikram does not understand Hindi, I wanted to curse him in Hindi and tell him, "Sir, वो खतरों का खिलाड़ी है, लेकिन हमसे क्यों खेलता है?"
Correct. But I had taught him some Hindi, yes. At least the ones which we should not be speaking.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. I didn't want to interrupt anyone, but it was too important for me to come and say hello to Ashish. He is like the very, very important person, and he's come to our house to talk to us. I think it's a huge privilege and an honor.
Thank you, sir.
So sorry to interrupt, but please carry on. I am sandwiched between the two meetings. I will definitely go through the recording of this particular episode.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Okay, thank you, Ashish. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, so I'll go ahead. So basically, I gave you the background of how I kind of dropped into that team. And then we hired a consultancy firm called ISC, International Securities Consultants, which was a motley group of 5 people promoted by a British lady married to a Sri Lankan working out of Hong Kong. And so we created a IT RFP, request for proposal, which many of you might be filling in as answers to sort of many of the contracts you get. And so we created this RFP, which was a monolithic RFP of hardware, software, telecom all into one. And we issued to like 40 parties across the world. And halfway into the process, people said that you should separate out the telecom from the hardware software, because these are two different activities, and for telecom you will require licensees, and those are specialist companies. And so we separate out basically the two parts from the same RFP. And that's how we had finally few finalists for the telecom part and few finalists for the trading system part, that is hardware software part. And that's where basically TCS won the hardware software part. We wanted a single a consortium with a single leader. So TCS basically won that competition. It had Wipro, HCL, IBM, and many other players those days, HP, and so on and so forth. And so TCS had a software taken from an exchange in Vancouver, made by a company called TCAM in New York, on a language called PL1. I don't know how many of you have heard of it, but I come from that vintage, which was not even taught to me. PL1 is even before Fortran. Okay, so that was the language in which this software was written, in a hardware called Stratus, because the computers used to close down faster. So even Unix ones. So there were specialized hardware that used to come, which would not fail. They were called fail-safe hardwares, and this Stratus was the fail-safe one. So even if you take out CPU, still nothing will happen because they were always double. Everything was double. All the processing used to happen double, or committing used to happen double, and stuff like that. And so that was basically the TCS part of it. And then on the telecom part, we had planned to go for lease lines initially. And those days, 64 kilobits per second lease line in a point-to-point basis within Bombay used to cost me 4 lakh rupees per annum. Okay, 4 lakh rupees for 64 kilobits per second. And Bombay, Calcutta used to be 40 lakhs, 64 kilobits. Okay. And so we had done lease lines in Bombay, and I created the first private lease line network in India. But I'd also thought about with the team which was supporting us consultancy-wise, that we will use satellite for the nationwide because otherwise the cost would be unaffordable. So we had this lot of insets going up there, Aryabhat and a lot of Inset 1, 2, 3, and we were not using them. So we asked government that can we use them for trading purposes, commercial purposes, and there was a huge resistance from the scientists saying no, we can't allow you. Then the Department of Telecom, but I had to go through all the Chakraview that kept on happening and got the licenses. And finally, that contract had 3 vendors: AT&T Tridom, GTE SpaceNet, and Comsat Max. Comsat, which became Comsat Max in India, and Hughes. Hughes was Hughes India, and then GTE SpaceNet later on was taken over by GE. It was called GE SpaceNet, and then later on it became what is now known as Verizon. He took the Indian vendor was HCL, and they set up a separate company called HCL Comnet just for my project. And the CEO was Vinit Nair, not the Vinit Nair of there were 2 Vinit Nairs. One of them is ex-HCL, the other is ex-HCL.
Ashish, that Vinit also addressed one of these sessions.
Okay. The old Vinit or the new Vinit?
The Vinit Junior, the guy who was there when
yes. Okay. So Vinit Nair became CEO of that. And so in a way, I had some contribution even in setting up that HCL Comnet thing also, because it was literally created for this project first time. And the protocol which we had kind of used was something called X.25. I don't know how many of you have worked on it, but X.25 was an old protocol. It was working. Well, as TCP/IP was new, it was coming afresh, and we were not confident how it will pick up. So we went on a bad old technology, X.25. Satellite is naturally a broadcast medium, and it's not good for point-to-point because there is only so much of bandwidth that is available. But we kind of designed to tweak it. There was some company called Gilat, which was giving us in Israel. Again, the owner, whose name was Amiram, he became a billionaire personally later on. But basically, we did a lot of tweaking, turning around of various things. And in a way, these were like very pioneering projects. India had done only one large project for Indian IT companies before that, which was what we call railway reservation system. And it was distributed. It was very nice for that time, but there was nothing real time. There was nothing sort of really eye-opening, like a wow moment of Indian IT industry. This is, I'm talking about 93, 94. Okay. And so Indian IT was slowly coming up. It was what I call manpower supply situation with Infosys doing little here, little there. They just got listed. Wipro was not even there. Probably it was just trying to come in to the market. TCS was there in NASDAQ by supplying people in 1 or 2 Swiss exchange. It was there. And so we had like a very low-end reputation those days. But once we set this up, the entire hardware, software, telecom, the working system, this was literally an sort of a revolution in the stock market across the world. Before that, no large stock exchange was actually trading on screen. In a sense, you place orders and they match by algorithms. Matching used to be manual, either by phone or on the floor. physical floor. Whereas here, it was basically done by algorithm. And I worked on those algorithms. I worked with TCS people. I worked with the HCL Comnet people. And that's how I came to know Vikram, because Vikram used to be the right-hand man of Junior Vinit Nair those days. And so we used to have heated sort of exchanges those days. He was a very plucky young guy. His boss was even pluckier. But we had like really tough times. And one interesting incident I still recall is that we had imported this large 30-feet antenna, first time in India, a 30-feet dish antenna as a hub of the sort of a hub and spoke arrangement of the VSATs. And the material had come to the ports of Bombay, and as an advance team had been sent to implement that. There were like very large wrestler-looking guys from America, white guys, really with muscles, each muscle of 50 kilo each type guys, working on that. And as soon as the material arrived on the port, the customs officers went on strike. And so that strike lasted for 40 days. And we were just trying to take it out after that. We kept on stopping those guys from going home. And one day news came that there is a plague in Surat. Like today we have COVID. Surat plague came like a shock to the world. This was in 1994. 93 and 94, probably it was 94, yeah, early 94. And one night I was like in the office at 3. I used to sleep many days in the office. So at 3 o'clock, those two large guys came and said, we want to go. I said, yeah, go. Anyway, today's work is over. Come back tomorrow. And they said, no, we want to go home. And I said, what happened? They said, no, now there is a plague and we are going to die. I said, boss, you are so healthy and I am so weak. If there is somebody who will die, I'll die first. He will not die. They said, no, but we have to go. And we have talked to our management. We have talked to HCL Comnet. And so we had a longish sort of conference calls. And then those guys were pushing us to let these people go. And I said, okay, give me your passports. And they gave me the passport. I put them into a locker and said, now you go. And then finally, we had, of course, if they had just caught me, I would have died. I mean, I was so puny. But effectively, they were very kind. And finally, we agreed with their management that if we can't take the material out of customs within 7 days, we'll have to send them back. And then I and my boss, Dr. Patil, went to customs, requested them. They allowed us without payment of stamp duty or customs duty. And later on, we paid the customs duty after the strike was over. But effectively, there we had to interact with Vikram and others. But literally, it was a daily interaction. I used to be in NSE office at some point in time, all the time. But those were the days. And when NSE became live in bond markets, it was Bombay market. It went live early April, May of 94. And then Mr. Manmohan Singh, who was finance minister, came and inaugurated in June. And then the equities market went live in November, Diwali day, November 394. And the first day of November 394, we lit the telecom network on satellite. At 4 in the morning, I went to pick up the guy. Vikram might still recall a guy called Karamchand.
Yeah.
And there used to be a TV serial called Karamchand Jasoos. So, and he was of Indian origin, Telugu guy. He came in, I picked him at 4. By 2 o'clock, we had fired the first VSAT, never used in India before, not in a bandwidth that has been ever used in world before, using X.25 protocol modified, which has not been used in the world before. It worked like magic. And after that, it never stopped, except when it became commercially unviable. But effectively, there were so many technological changes that happened that same VSAT network started getting used for the ATM networks across the country. ATM networks would not have been possible without the VSAT network, because they were data networks and they would only use the bits and bytes only when it was required, not perpetually connected. And then later on, the cell phone came and it took away the basic cost advantage of cost, and also what I call advantage of not digging. Otherwise, to connect, you have to dig a lot, while as putting an antenna was easy. And both advantages went away with the sort of cellular phones coming in later on with data capabilities. But initially, the entire working of NSE was like a technology demonstrator for India. It showed the engineers and engineering prowess of India. When I still say that when I was young, and I was studying, we were probably making 500 computer science engineers a year. And later on, when the boom came in Y2K, we were still probably making 50,000 computer science engineers a year. But everyone started printing the certificates at home, started learning home, the computer science from their friends, relatives, wherever, or even NIIT and AppTech and all, and started going abroad with fake certificates and actually did a good job. So effectively, that few projects which actually got India that confidence that we can do it, literally NSE was the largest contributor to what I call national integration also, because wherever you were, whether you were in Srinagar or Cochin or Manipur or in Dwarka, you had the same response time because all of you were going to the satellite and coming back into the NSE's hub. And the total travel distance was 36,000 kilometers multiplied by 4 because of that hop. And so you were always traveling 144,000 kilometers, and that would basically be half a second. So we could not give you response time unless you were literally sitting with me of sort of less than half a second. Today, now I give you response time of a median of, when I advertise 6 microseconds, which is 10 raised to minus 6 seconds. But I do give you response time of pretty much 1 or 2 microseconds, which is 1 by 500,000 of a second or 1 by millionth of a second on average, right? So the speed has gone up. The scale in the first year, we started doing 100,000 trades a day after 12 months, and NSE had become larger than BSE, which was like 120-year-old. And in the meantime, BSE started doing its own automation, and CMC had provided them automation using hardware called TEM. I don't know how many of you. That was also a different type of sort of fault tolerance, which was software-based fault tolerance vis-a-vis hardware-based fault tolerance of Stratus. But all of them have now become less useful because of the new machines, what I call the pizza boxes, becoming more reliable, and also the software itself taking care of all the other sort of fault tolerant part of it. And so we used to have in-memory databases so that you don't commit. If you commit, you end up spending a lot of milliseconds. So we had to do everything in the memory and stuff like that. But then those days memories were not that great. And so we had to literally program very, very sort of in a difficult way. And then in 95, and we became larger than BSE. And then I was told that we had already hired a CIO, because I was asked whether you want to be a finance guy or an IT guy. And I said, I am a finance guy because that's what I love doing. I started equities also for NSE, and it became very large. Of course, technology is something I did from first principles. There was nobody to teach me telecom. I had not learned telecom from anyone. I was reading books and learning it. But nobody had taught me software programming or in-memory databases, but I was learning out of the books. Nobody had taught me basics of networking, even LAN, WAN, anything. I was learning out of my own. And so I was learning out of what I call first principles, and it worked. So that established some sort of confidence in me. I can do it. And then 95, and I was not the IT head, but they also hired a new head for the equities market. And so I was again jobless. Whenever an organization becomes large, sometimes the people who work the hardest lose out on politics, which happened to me. And I was young, like 25, 26 by then. And I didn't have a clue of how this politics business works. And Vikram probably was more perceptive. He used to point out many things to me, and I used to be happy-go-lucky. So we never, I never actually took it to heart. But somewhere I was told to set up derivatives market, which was never again a starter, because a few years back, there was a guy called Nick Leeson, who had traded in derivatives in Singapore exchange and busted his own bank called Barings Bank. So if you want to read out, you can read up on Barings Bank collapse by Nick Leeson. And so everyone thought, put this guy into that. He's a fool. He'll work hard and slowly he will wither away. By quirk of fate, I ended up working on derivatives, and I had to change the laws. I had to create regulations like I did for equities, but new softwares, new hardwares, everything. And with a lot of efforts, in 2000, the government allowed the derivatives after many committees. I created Nifty Index, if you've heard of that. Before that, I created NSE 100 in 94 itself. And then we stopped it and created Nifty. And so effectively, when the derivatives market was allowed, I decided to quit and created my own B2B e-commerce market for manufactured commodities. So I went to Reliance. They gave me funding. In fact, they called me and they gave me funding, and I started my own infrastructure company for markets in e-commerce. And then we started 3 markets: petrochemicalsnext.com, papernext.com, and steelnext.com. And then 2001, everything busted. So from a height of success in 2000, I came on road in 2001. And I had 100 people's responsibility on me, because those people were dependent on me. And so I went to Mr. Ambani and said, now what to do? And he said, no, you are basically a sincere guy. You know a little bit of technology. We are spending a lot of money on telecom. Why don't you start helping them out? And so we went there as a kind of a in-house consultants into that team, which had like 3,000 people from CGEY, 1,000 people from Diamond Cluster, a few hundred people from every consultancy, McKinsey, whatever you can think of were there, like 10, 15,000 people. And we were like 100 of us, internal, external guys moving around. Nobody cared about us. And then they had, when they launched the telecom, they had a billing problem. If you guys recall, 501 rupee scheme was there, and they had 1.5 crore customers, and billing was going wrong. And one day, Mr. Ambani called me in the night. He works pretty late. And he said, what does a CIO do in a telecom company? So that is Chief Information Officer. So I said, okay, I'll come back. And next day, like any MBA, I went to the internet, did copy paste, came out with a new job specs for a CIO for a telecom company, went to him, and he said, okay, you are the CIO, clean up the mess. And that's how I became the CIO of Reliance Infocom. And I could clean up the mess in 6 months' time. And so I got a reputation of a great IT guy, even in Reliance, while as I was always wanting to be a finance guy and an entrepreneur. Instead, IT was not leaving me. So I became kind of very well known in Reliance Group as an IT champ. And then brothers split immediately. The Reliance Infocom hired a Bharti Telecom CIO as their CIO. So I said, I will not work now. I'm pretty okay. I'll go into academics and teach students. I used to teach students derivatives even in those days. And so I said, I'll go and teach students in various colleges. And then Mr. Mukesh Ambani called me saying, if you quit, I have a job for you. And I said, sir, don't take pity on me. If you have a good job, I'll come. Otherwise, I'm happy. I'll find a job for myself. So he said, no, you come and meet me. And he made me CIO of Reliance Group, which was more into petrochemicals, refining, oil and gas, schools, colleges. They were getting into retail. And so I became the head of IT for Reliance Group with several plants across the country and the world. And later on, within 2 years, I was awarded with Chemical Week CIO, the best CIO in the world in chemical industries, and so on and so forth. And then I became PR head, public relations head of Reliance Group, and they bought a cricket team. And I am a fanatic cricket lover with a lot of enthusiasm and no talent. But Mr. Ambani knew this. And so he likes these guys, who have no talent. And so one day I got a call from his office saying, again, very late in the night, literally, saying you have to meet Mrs. Ambani. I went, met her, and she said, now you have to run the Mumbai Indians cricket team, which we have bought. But 4 days hence, there's a match, and you need to sell the tickets. And I said, Madam, I have not sold the tickets, but think I will do it if bosses say it. And so I could sell the tickets, and that got them sort of trusting me in the business of cricket, which was not the cricket itself, but business of cricket, right? We were trying to make business out of cricket, first time in India. And I ended up successfully managing all the matches which were in Bombay, some in Wankhede, some in DY Patil. It was a nightmare of 35-40 days, but I ended up closing all accounts, giving back them all the money and accounts and all, and went back to my IT job and as a PR head job. And then next year they again went to South Africa. Then Mr. Ambani said, what is your plan? And I thought I was not the CEO any longer of Mumbai Indians, but it seems I was. So I had to take the team to South Africa, stay with them for 50 days. It was fun time. Of course, a lot of troubles because I had to do logistics and taking care of everything, including guests coming and stuff like that. And then I sold a company which I had, a hobby company on software for stockbrokers, which BSE bought. Came to BSE as kind of a dowry for the company's merger for 1 year. My family was getting some money. It would have been good for my retirement. So I came for 1 year as a part of the contract, and now my 11th year getting over. And I became CEO 3 years later. And then we changed the BSE's trading systems, clearing systems, settlement systems. In the meantime, I got mobile trading launched, algorithms, and I've done many activities largely connected to IT, but I am not a software, what I call manpower provider. I use softwares, I use IT for solving real world problems, largely in India. I worked pretty much in India, except few plants which we had in Germany and Malaysia and Poland and all. But effectively, that's what the story of the stock exchanges as a kind of harbinger of the technological prowess that India had, that in COVID times, of course, Y2K kind of got a lot of credit to India. And COVID times, India did not stop its markets even for a single second. But more importantly, India did not stop the markets for the rest of the world, because the rest of the world's markets are also now running out of India. All banks, back office are here. You guys are pretty much familiar with all that, right? Even software guys, I mean, all of you are here, pretty much many of you. And nothing stopped despite 70 days of complete lockdown, which even China couldn't do. And that tells you that $200 billion later and 45 lakhs minimum direct employment and probably 4-5 crore indirect, along with the panwalas and the taxiwalas and truckwalas who support the IT industry. This has been basically the stock markets were pretty much the harbinger of India's technological prowess. And I just wanted all of you to know this story, because this story nobody knows, because the people who became famous and glamorous are the people who supplied manpower abroad, not the people who used IT and kind of created confidence in India and changed India's life and make it completely technologically oriented, despite being such a poor country, right? And so I just wanted you guys to know that this is a story as much of a struggle, as much of the sort of fear of unknown as anything else. But Indians got together, everyone from HCL to the TCS to everyone from every government servant, they pulled together this entire automation framework and made it work. In retrospect, it looks like magic, but it was tough when I was doing it. So I hope this gave you a perspective on what went through in early 90s to pretty much till 2000, and then a little bit on later on. I think, I hope this is an interesting story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, amongst the so many things that you've been very candid, right? I mean, super candid, came across as this, I mean, you didn't, with all this illustrious background that you have, you never made I don't think, at least I, and I'm sure the audience never made them feel that, you were superly superior. I mean, just say, I am you, came through so very well, and we salute you for that. And of course, you also said, the glamorous people out there, and you applauded, and that one glamorous guy is on the video there. So I think thank you for that. That's a very nice story, right? I mean, let's see, keep saying this, right? In the gold rush, people never made money in the gold. The guys who sold the jeans and the shovels and all that, they made the money. So this was another example of that. So Amrita, if you have any questions in the queue, you may want to read that. If there is anything that Vikram you want to ask in the meanwhile.
Ashish, also, if you could just elaborate on what, I mean, you did for the SMB sector in the COVID time, because there are a lot of initiatives you have kickstarted in the last few months itself, isn't it?
So basically, we have a startup segment where we list young companies. Even if they want 1 crore, we are able to get them. We have a SME segment, which is also pretty vibrant. We have already listed 327 companies. So if you want 1 crore to even 50 crores, we raise for you. And in the COVID period also, we have done that. We have raised almost 3.727 lakh crore of bonds. So in the COVID period, from 23rd March to June 7, we have raised a lot of commercial papers and bonds and all. And so basically, a lot of things during this time we have done. We have launched rupee dollar settle contract from Gandhinagar Gift City, where we have another exchange called India International Exchange that was inaugurated by Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi on January 9, 2017. And so there also Honorable Finance Minister launched that rupee dollar contract, which is very important because it's a special economic zone, trying to bring back the offshore contracts onto the Gift City, which is an onshore center for us. We also launched insurance distribution market, where a lot of insurance companies are connected to us. And the other side, there are a lot of agents who go to the parties or even on the internet. They can show the comparable policy structures and then able to buy the policies and give to the customers, insurance buyers on real time. So that's a very unique sort of situation. We have just started during COVID time, and we have already sold more than 2,000 policies. And we have got almost 6,000 plus people registered as agents with us now. And we also started options in deliverable commodities, options in goods as it is called, in gold and silver on June 1. Today we would be closing probably with 3,000 crore of turnover in one single day today in that market itself. So several new stuff, eKYC, where you don't have to do the know your client by going physically to customers. We do it with the Aadhaar and integration with Aadhaar and video eKYC. So that also we launched during the COVID period. So a lot of, I mean, for me, the technology has some unbelievable advantage over manual systems. They scale you up so much that you cannot even imagine. The best of Harshad Mehta days, which many of us old people still remember as the golden days of Indian stock market. The entire market used to trade around 300 to 400 crore rupees a day, maximum. Today, on a good day, Indian markets will trade 20 lakh crore in one day. Huh? So 300, 400 crore vis-a-vis 20 lakh crore is like a several degrees of difference, right? Mm-hmm. And that happens because the automation allows you to do that, get more people, get faster execution and stuff like that. So for me, technology is going to change the world and change India. It has changed India drastically over the last 30 years. But in next 50 years, if India has to sort of grow up, become rich, and become among the top 3 nations or the top 3 richest nations in the world, it will be happening through technology. And my hypothesis is that next 50 years, the world will create wealth that has not been created in the last 10,000 years. And India, with 17% of world population and around 20% of young population, with all of them technology savvy looking forward, we will probably create 25% of world GDP and world wealth, which is going to be almost at the end of next 50 years will be around $100 trillion wealth. World will be around $700 trillion wealth. And we will still be in the middle income countries, but from $2,000 per annum, we would have gone to probably $15,000 or $20,000 per annum.
There is something called as "Aapke muh mein ghee shakkar." For those who are from other non-Indian thing, what that means is, I hope what you say is true. We will give you sugar and whatever, clarified butter or whatever it is, something like that. Yeah. So Amrita.
Yes, KG. Thank you so much, Ashish. We have a couple of questions on the chat window. And the first question I would like to ask you is, this is by Gajana Prasad and Harish A. So I just ask a combined question. What is your view on cryptocurrency exchange in India? Have you ever thought of taking it up? And what could be the future of Bitcoin trading?
The currency exchange are available on BSE. You can trade currencies, not only rupee dollar, but you can trade on rupee,
I think
pound,
he said cryptocurrency.
Okay, cryptocurrency for me. Okay, cryptocurrency for me is a monopoly money. You know, monopoly. You have played Monopoly, right? So it's basically the beauty is in the eyes of the beholden. That doesn't mean that the national currencies are any better than monopoly currencies, but it is monopoly backed by a monopoly of force, which is the state. That's why it is still believable. All other currencies are basically a monopoly money, which is in a way you can create one series and you can create the same series and one more series. And so you can have Bitcoin, Nitcoin of the same type, same algorithms. And then there can be infinite number of algorithms. So you'll have literally infinite multiplied by infinite number of currencies floating around in the world. And so effectively, if you have too much of infinity, then its value goes to zero, like air and other things, right? So effectively, all of them have no value inherently. But many people tell me that how it is different from stocks. What happens is stocks, when you buy, you become owner of a part of the company, which has a promise to do economic activity. And if the profits come, you get to share that, right? Well, in Bitcoin or any other types of coin, there is no such thing behind. You are searching for next fool to buy at higher price, right? And slowly fools get tired of being fooled. And even if they don't get tired, their money gets over. So finally, all this will end up being zero at some point in time in future, if not tomorrow.
Thank you, Ashish. There's a question from Sanjay Mitra. What remains static according to you with the changing business environment? A factor that remains static as per you.
There is nothing static. What is static is dead. Okay, so everything has to change. Some things change with fast, some things change slow, but anything which is living, and society is a living being, economy is a living thing. The trees, and whenever you stop growing or stop moving, you are pretty much dead, right? And so, and what is dead is not interesting. So for me, everything moves, and that's pretty much my life motto is that you have to keep on moving.
Awesome, great. There's a question from Praveen Gupta. He asks, where do you see stocks after 8 years from 10K Nifty, and which are your top 3 favorite ones?
I mean, I have not invested in stocks after 94. Broadly, I was in Reliance for some time. I had some stock options, but otherwise, by regulations, I'm not allowed to invest in stocks. That doesn't stop me from predicting and all. And I am as bad a predictor as anyone else is because I'm not that rich. So you can figure out that believing in me will be a foolishness. And still I can predict that if the economy grows as X%, or probably the stock market will grow at 2-3% more at least on an average basis going forward. So that's how it's going to happen, at least in India, because it's still a growing country with a lot of consumption coming in, unlike other countries which have become old versus a young sort of consumption country. And so you will see some large upside going forward. Just to give you comparables, the Sensex on 1979, 1st April, was started as 100. Okay. Today it is 36,000 after a big drop. Okay. And if you take the dividends which those stocks gave, it would be around 56,000 today. Okay. So 100 to 56,000, that's 560 times, or 56,000 percentage returns it gave in last 41 years, right? So there is no other asset class, whether it's real estate, real estate or gold or bank deposits or anything. There is no other asset class which is dumb, which doesn't require you to be closer to anyone, has given that kind of returns in India or internationally. Literally, basically on a compounded basis, it's giving you almost 16-17% returns on Indian rupee terms. And even in dollar terms, it's pretty much the best performing index in the world, or in dollar terms also, over last 41 years. And that's why even if you don't do trading every day, just invest in the index. There are now many index funds. If you put in a little bit of your asset into that and don't trade every day, just stay there, probably 10 years, 20 years, you will have very large sums in your hand.
Amazing. No, I just want to ask one question, Amrita. I'll just build on Santosh Kulkarni's question, which says, what does it take to retain a talent like you in India? But, I just want to build further on that to say that in today's times, a lot of people, India, and like you said before, you actually gave a lot of hope. A lot of youngsters look at, hey, let's migrate, things are going to get bad, we're going to run away. And that happened once before also, it's happening now again. So what made you stay? And what do you think does it take for a country like us to retain talent here?
Yeah, I think a priori, nobody knows what the talent is. And if you can identify the talent upfront, that talent may not be worth it. So we are basically what I call people from school of hard knocks. Slowly we learned how to get things done in India. So we were not talent who was like talent identified from childhood. At least I don't see it that way. And so that is broadly the way there are, everyone has a sort of ability to work. And in a particular society, if somebody can get the work out and little understand the technology, India today has like pretty much close to 10 million or more people who are as intelligent as anyone else in the world. And so even if 8-9 million of them go away, I would be delighted that the rest 1 million will generate another 10-20 million people, and it'll work. On my own personal story, it's really different. It may look like that I stayed back, but it was in a way destiny, providence as I call it. When I came out of IIM, by that time my entire family, between IIT and IIM, my entire family had actually migrated to US. My sister, my mother, my father was on the verge of going, and my brother was going. And there was a pressure for me to also go to US. So I had applied to American universities for MBA again. And one of them gave me a scholarship, Arizona State University. So I went to, when I was in IDBI. So when I went to get the visa, I was rejected because I am a Gujarati, unmarried, IIT IIM, and I would certainly stay back. And of course, without money. So that was a large risk of migration for US visa officer, and he rejected. I went again, and he rejected me again. And then when I had to, I was told to go and select the technology for the satellite. That time I had to go to US again. And all my vendors, including Vinit Nair and the AT&T guys and everyone, had got a lot of senators to write about my visa, because I had told that I have been rejected twice, I will not get a visa. And lo and behold, when I went to take visa on business basis from student, they rejected me again, saying you have already been rejected and you are a large migration risk. So that time I had a chairman called SS Nadkarni, who had just retired from IDBI as a chairman, and he was chairman of NSE. He called the American ambassador to that small little office, which was under construction at Mahindra Towers in Worli. If some of you have been to Mahindra Towers, that time Anand didn't sit there. I think I recall Ullas Yarkop sitting there.
Yeah, he's
on
still
the
there.
fourth floor. But I don't think, yeah, Anand used to sit in the fort area. And so he was called and explained and then said that this boy needs to go to US and you need to get him the visa. And even the American ambassador was surprising how a 25-year-old is going to take a decision on $100 million in India where youth doesn't count. And my chairman said that if this boy doesn't go, I will ensure that the $100 million of contract will not come to American company. And so he sent me, and again I was rejected. Then he gave a personal guarantee on my name, saying that I know this boy. Of course, we are not related. I am a Gujarati. He was a Marathi. He gave a personal guarantee in writing that I take a guarantee that this boy will come back. And then second time, they gave me the visa only for 7 days during Christmas times, knowing fully well that the offices will be closed. The vendors opened offices because this was like a very important project. And I came back in 7th day. And then my boss said, okay, go and meet the visa officer and say that Indians don't lie. So that's how I went and met him. But after that, in 2000, February, after NSE became successful and I was trying to go again out of NSE, that time I was in World Bank giving interview for Young Professionals Program. That was my 30th year last year for Young Professional Program of World Bank. And they had a lot of ice, been snow, and it had become sleet because BC cannot handle ice or snow well. And so the city had closed for 7 days. I was sitting there next to the World Bank headquarters, going to World Bank office, and somebody randomly would interview me, knowing that they are not even worth interviewing, but they would just chit chat, and I will go home to the hotel. And then one day I got a call from Reliance saying that I am such and such calling, and we hear that you are trying to go abroad, but if you want to start your own company, we'll fund you. And I told him that if I don't get this job, World Bank, because I am basically a development banker in my own mind. So if I get a World Bank job, which is young professionals, it's like IES for World Bank. If I get that, I will go. Otherwise, I'll come back and take your funding and start my own sort of exchange. And that's how I was selected, but not as a young professional, but an expert in capital markets. And the position was supposed to be in India, so I rejected that and came back. By the time I had seen US, it looks very nice, but in a way, my impression of going for 6-7 years, sometimes 2-3 times a year, sometimes even for literally 3 hours just to go, touch, sign, and come back. I was reasonably clear that whatever my country, I would rather stay in my country than US, except if the World Bank job came, but it didn't come.
Hello.
So the story is slightly different. And once in Reliance, we had called some novel laureates. And I told him the story, and he said, US's loss is India's gain. And I said, it didn't look that time, but somehow this is part of providence. Don't think people going abroad are the only talented, and people staying here are the not talented and stuff like that. I mean, pretty much, I have huge confidence that large part of India is hugely talented. They might not have learned things in English, but many of them are very smart.
I'm sure. And I think you must consider writing a book. There's so much to your life story that people can learn from. I think we are beyond time. We are at 8:10. And I would not like to hold you back, sir. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you, audience, for making prime time what it is. Wherever you are in the world, good evening, good morning, good night. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.